Hello, sir. So I got a part 2 for your video here too. We're going to continue making this to spec, and I'm going to show you a couple of the techniques that we use. So first I just want you to look at the bee that you sent me and what I've done to it. First I removed all your fill. We don't use the fill, and the fill actually is extra labor for us to remove, so don't fill anything. Second, when we're taking a look at our bubbled lines here, in terms of trying to make this into a stencil, we have to be aware of the engineering aspect of it, not just the graphical design aspect of it. And so what's going on here is we're trying to remove pieces of material so that they fall out of a larger square of material. This way someone can come behind and put paint down on top, and it'll form a pattern underneath through the holes that we're making. Now, because simple things like this font, it uses the letter B, and the letter B has 2 bubbles in it. So we're just going to focus on that first. How can we fix that? How can we generalize that to the rest of the design afterward? First things first, I recommend using the 2-point line tool, and you'll use it to connect sections. The reason we're going to connect sections is because we're going to later have to delete those sections. And here I'm going to take advantage of one of your natural seams, and we're going to make 2 tabs at the same time here. The way this will work is by connecting these nodes across, we've created 2 new lines with 2 separate nodes. These independent vectors can be removed using the virtual segment delete tool. Just like that. Now as we zoom out, we can see that this internal area is now attached to the larger area. And as we zoom out further, we'll make sure that that larger area is also not attached. But first we're just going to focus on this B. So as we separated this block here, we've created an opening, and we've sealed off 2 other lines. And now we have to consider these internal areas that we have still sealed off. How are we going to reattach them? I'd say to continue using the same method. Switch to your 2-point line tool, use it to make a cut somewhere along the line. Generally you want to put the cut someplace where it'll make the least impact on the person using it. And then keep in mind you want to keep about that same 3 to 4 millimeter gap too. 3 to 4 millimeter gap is 4 times the size of a ballpoint pen, and it creates clean lines for people. So now you can see we've opened up this internal space and reattach it to the larger outer. And we've isolated an area here and another cut here. But this cut here connects. Because it connects, you're going to have a big, long, flappy piece. So what we want to do is we want to support that flappy piece. The way we'll do that is we'll reconnect it. Probably the best way to do that is to continue adding tabs like we have, and continue adding more and more gaps that bring the whole piece together structurally. This isn't going to be the best way, but this will be a quick demonstrative way. We'll continue cutting this long shape here down into smaller pieces. So probably the first thing we should do is cap it off. Right now it's no longer a part of that other shape. Now we just need to worry about it supporting itself. And as it turns out, let's take a look at that again. So we have one solid piece here, and that's a solid piece. Those are good. This internal part here is tabbed. And we see actually we want to remove that piece that we made earlier, because it closes off one of our tabs that we actually want to preserve, which implies that we need to close this other side instead. So we'll close it up. Good to go. Now we reevaluate. Now we have isolated those components. We've created a freedom of material to provide structure. And we didn't leave any orphans, which means free-floating shapes inside of another shape. So the top half of the B can be considered done. Each of its shapes are independent. Each of those shapes is tabbed out to the larger material. Each of those shapes has 3 millimeter tabs and 3 millimeter bubble gaps. So if we continue the process up here from the top half of the bee to the bottom half of the bee, we can consider it complete. And so we'll do the same thing we did before. We'll reevaluate the empty space inside this shape. One of the first things that pops out is that we have an incomplete line here. So we need to seal those back off. And we need to open back up this middle one because it's going to become a tab to hold this entire piece in. Or rather these two cuts back in. So back to our tool, virtual segment delete, and remove the one we're not going to use. And then we reevaluate now. On this top bee, we provided 1 tab, 2 tabs, 3 tabs. So the bulk of the weight here in this area is unsupported, unlike the top half. So we'll add an additional tab here. As we zoom back out, we see now that we have the capability for each of these internal lines and shape areas to remain attached to the larger piece while still allowing the cutouts to preserve the design as we like. So all that remains now is to consider this first, the backbone of the bee itself and the bottom's inner structure. We'll probably tab it the same way we had the first one, which is quick and easy. It's just a line straight down, isolating the shapes, and then you remove the connectors. It's super simple. By doing so, we've done essentially everything required to make this component of the design correct. The only thing that remains now is to reconsider our spacing, and you can see here one of our lines closed the tab. So there's a lot of proofreading that's required, and no one ever said this is a quick process either. And now as I evaluate this bee, I only see its spine remains to be tabbed, but I also notice that these sparkle components are overlapping it. Overlapping cuts don't work because the material will have fallen out here, and so it's a lot of wasted laser space. And also these are not necessarily requirements of the design, so we're just going to remove them. These will be artistic flourishes that are used separately after the design has been stenciled, or rather after the design stencil has been applied. So with that cleaned up and our lines preserved and our focus on the spine of the bee returning, we'll evaluate what the best way or place is to create our tabs. Right now we have 2 shapes overlapping each other. I've got one outside and one inside. What we really don't need is this whole internal line. In fact, we can completely remove it. Upon removing it, you'll see that the shape opens up as it ought to be, and the problem is gone. The requirement to tab it is gone, and so are the requirements to space it. So now let's review. As we look at this, we've only changed one aspect of the design, and we only used 2 tools to do it. We applied those tools creatively to accomplish our goal, and then we evaluated to make sure that it looks correct, and we thought through how it will print out when it's cut. So let's continue evaluating, because I actually see one more mistake. I see here that there was an overhang of a cut, and we didn't remove that gap. So now we have preserved our gaps again. Now here we have an issue. There is one issue I'm noticing too. See this line here between the backbone of the bee and the inside of the bee? It doesn't have a shape anymore because we've cut it. We cut the shape's circle here, leaving this as a big open tab flapping around. And then we did the same thing here to the spine, and that left this orphan. That's what we call these, are orphans. It's a line that doesn't make a shape. Any line that doesn't make a shape needs to be completed into a shape and tabbed apart from its components. So in this one, because it's a straight line, we'll be able to quick and easily extend it, keep it parallel, and then rejoin it. And now we have these gaps in red between them. We're just going to quickly remove them using the same tool sets as before. Now our internal tabbed piece is 100% complete, and the only job that remains is to generalize that task to the rest of the design. So let's look at another complicated part of it, right? Let's look at something like Santa's eyes. How would I get Santa's iris to connect to this outer tabbing area in the main material when it has to go through several shapes to get there? Unfortunately, what this actually takes is creating the manual tabs between all those spaces, deleting the connectors, and then opening up that space. And see, now I have a tab available from the outside to the inner area here, but I still have isolated my sunglasses of Santa, my eyeball of Santa, and my eyebrow of Santa, whereas his eyelashes aren't shapes, so we can't cut them out. What we'll need to do is we're going to remove the lashes, and then we'll extend the eye angle. Not sure of a better name to call it. We'll do that again with our just 2-point line tool. And what we need to do is we need to trace a bubble out that's going to make a shape for us. Alright, now completed the outside shape, but it doesn't have a gap here as it aligned to this other one. So what we'll do here is we'll bring it in. We'll completely eliminate that problem in the simplest way. There we are. Now we've isolated our shape from the sunglasses. Now we need to tab the shape away from its internals. And I would do that by removing these joining lines. Look at how simple this will be. There we are. We've now isolated the two shapes. What we need to do is find these two orphans, some new tabs, a new tab path through back to the main material. Because these aren't dual lines, we'll have to draw the dual line. Now, this isn't going to be a perfect circle, and that's because we're zoomed in some few thousand%, which means these very minor angles will be washed out at full size. So the only thing left once we've completed that inner design is to tab it through with connections back out to the main material. There we are. Now a person can come here and fill this area out and not this inner portion. The rest of the eye, let's complete it too. We've got a shape here. We're just going to trace the internals of that shape. We'll try to preserve as much as we can of the 3 millimeters. There we are. Whoops, made a mistake here. Let's move this node down some so it doesn't touch. There we are. Preserve that spacing. Alright, so now we've got two independent shapes. We just need to tab them. We don't want to tab straight through the eye because of the complication of it. It'll require us to make several new cuts and shapes. But we can come up here to this edge and we can just put one here. There we are. Coming back to our tool for removing virtual segments, we're left with another tabbed shape associated with the outer edge. We also preserved a gap here, and that gap is the tab holding the other part of the eyebrow. So now what we'll do is, let's sync that all up. Alright, let's bring all our red lines into, our black lines into red. Now our design is coherent. So, returning to his face now. So we just took a hugely complicated internal structure with multiple components, and with about 10 slices, we converted it into what our goal is. And all we have to do now is just continue that pattern and process throughout the remainder of the design, stopping to reevaluate that our pieces are still connected properly, and that the design isn't creating any orphans. Now, if you have any further questions, what you'll have to do is you'll have to contact me back through chat. I'll be here until 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.